In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern where models are starting to figure out the pattern after the 20th, kind of leaning more towards cold air, at least for a little bit after the 20th. That was a big question mark over the last few videos. Other than that, we do have a few snowstorms to track, including the one that's coming up here on Friday into Saturday for a lot of the central United States, a lot of the southeastern United States. And the big question mark today is going to be, will this be a southern slider that moves through fairly quickly the plains, the southern plains that is, into some deeper south states, into some of the southeast and southern mid-Atlantic? Or will it get that pull up the coast and actually impact a lot of the northern mid-Atlantic into New England? That's the big question mark today, and we're going to be trying to answer that as far as the models go today. If you've been watching the videos lately, you know that tomorrow they could be showing something a lot different as far as that pull up the coast. Now, for the areas that we see snowfall in for the south, I don't think things change too much based on if we see this get pulled up the coast or not. If anything, it might actually increase the amounts. So the areas that we're seeing snowfall in for the models today likely will still have that snowfall. Any changes, barring anything extreme, should just increase amounts and actually expand the areas that we see snowfall in. So let's take a look first off at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook updated yesterday, and this is for the 12th through the 16th. We do see continued cold being the trend here for a lot of the south central and especially the southeastern states. So again, 12th through 16th here. If you've also been keeping up with the videos, you know that the PNA, and that's short for Pacific North American Oscillation, is the big factor that we've been watching for. And we do see a lot less warmth out west, which would be a sign of a positive PNA. Typically, that's what causes cold air to move into the east. When it's colder, we see a lot warmer temperatures usually trend into the east. But really, the look that's interesting here is the PNA is not really driving the pattern anymore. I mean, we have maybe a negative leaning PNA, if not neutral, and we still see a lot of cold in the east, so a little bit of an interesting pattern there. We really have seen the PNA drive the pattern for the past, I would say, 6 months at least, through the fall and early winter, but maybe we're taking a break from that, seeing other types of patterns kind of driving what we're seeing here in the east. Pretty interesting stuff. When we look at the precipitation, keep in mind this is after our southern slider potential to go up the east coast, but this area looks to be drier after this storm is said and done for a little bit here, again, between the 12th and 16th. The main areas where we're seeing a lot of activity would be the northern plains here, as well as the very far southern plains, and pretty neutral in between. So really, the plains being kind of the highlight here, as well as the Rockies. Drier for the west coast as well. Much wetter for Alaska and Hawaii, as you can see as well, which is pretty interesting. 8 to 14 day outlook. This is going to be for the 14th through the 20th, once again issued yesterday on January 6th. We continue to see the coldest area be the southeast here, and actually, if we're being realistic, it does kind of extend into the south central states still. So not a huge change other than the fact that we continue to cool for the west, more of a negative PNA look, which doesn't really impact the east that much, which, as you know, that's been a huge, very impactful thing, but really not able to disrupt the cold in the east, at least from what's expected from the Climate Prediction Center here for the 14th through the 20th. Precipitation, a little bit drier for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, but probably a more positive look if you're hoping for snowfall as we get near normal conditions in a lot of these gray areas and even above average in here, kind of indicating that we'll see some Gulf storms trying to activate. And if that's the case, we'll kind of be game on for some tracking potentially further northward, maybe even up the coast. So that's a good look down here for anybody hoping for snowfall in the eastern states. Still, the Rockies and the plains seeing that highlight of above average precipitation. And although the west doesn't look quite as dry, still fairly dry for these areas. Alaska still above normal for most areas, as well as Hawaii. The 3 to 4 week outlook, which is not updated in almost a week now. We're going to see this updated every Friday. So this Friday, we will get an update for this. But this is what they were expecting as of January 3rd for the 18th through the 31st. Cold pushing from the north central states down into the eastern states, kind of what we've seen already from January. They were kind of just expecting that to kind of just continue in above normal for a lot of the west. So this would indicate a kind of resurgence of the positive PNA, which we have seen some models kind of trending at. So potentially after the 20th, seeing the positive PNA come back, a little warmer for New England. And, you know, it's weird. The Northeast and Great Lakes have been a little warmer despite the colder air heading towards the south. These areas have not really missed a beat as far as it being below freezing, and a lot of snowfall, especially coming from the Great Lakes. Slightly above normal for them is still very frigid, especially when you compare it to areas further south. So really doesn't make a huge difference. When we look at the precipitation, they do kind of indicate that we could see above average precipitation along the east. Again, this is a little bit outdated. This came out 4 days ago, so definitely could see some changes as we move forward, but this was their thinking at the time, as well as above average precipitation through the northwest. Now, when we take a look at their overall monthly outlook, it looks very similar to that 3 to 4 week outlook, actually, with warm along the west, positive PNA, cold in the east, kind of missing out in New England, but again, no huge difference really. And then for the precipitation, a little bit less activity here across the mid-Atlantic and southeast, but New England actually ends up getting above average on their monthly outlook, as well as the northwest once again. Mostly drier for the southern plains and the Four Corner states, although this hasn't really panned out so far, so we will see what happens. I guess it's panned out here for a lot of the southwest, but as far as the south central states go and areas across some of the Mississippi River area, this has been probably closer to above average throughout these areas so far. Now, when we look at how the past 7 days have gone, this is the full first 7 days of January. You could see some of the coldest areas have been the northern plains, northern Rockies, upper Midwest here, but a lot of this has trickled into the southeast, mid-Atlantic, and we've seen a lot of the northeast be warmer. So again, pretty close to their outlook actually for the month, and really coincide. It really just goes along with a lot of their outlooks that we've seen, you know, the 6 to 10, 8 to 14, the 3 to 4 weeks. This all looks on par with what they've been calling for. And we can see this very healthy looking positive PNA, which has really aided us in seeing a lot of cold so far through the month. So we'll have to see if this breaks up, if that makes a difference in the east or not. Right now they're saying no. I could see it disrupting things a little bit, so we'll have to wait and see. When we move on, we're going to take a look at the European model first. Again, the main thing I want you guys to pay attention to is storm number 1. There's 2 possibilities, and these 2 possibilities are very sensitive. It's not going to take a massive change to see large differences in the outcome. So we could see slight shifts, especially timing, I think. I think if this storm moves in a little bit quicker than anticipated, that gives us the better chance of seeing it pull up the coast. If it's a little slower on its arrival, that's where we get a lot more of like a flatter kind of southern slider type track. So again, the difference is something like that, or a quicker storm that wants to pull up the coast. And of course, anything in between is also possible. So we could see it pull up a little bit, but not enough to bring the mid-Atlantic and northeast snowfall. Anything in that realm is basically very, very possible right now. And it's hard to even say which one's more likely or not. I would say the southern slider look has been trending in over the past 24 hours, but of course we still have 3.5, 4 days to go. So there is some time for some changes. So we're going to be tracking all of this, but again, I want to kind of set the narrative for what you guys should be paying attention to. This is Tuesday, very, very cold, of course. We saw some snowfall yesterday on the tail end of our snowstorm that we just saw. I saw a few flakes, even got a little bit of a dusting here. I hardly count that as accumulation, but it would be the first little bit of accumulation I've even seen in like, I think 3 or 4 years. So pretty big deal for me down here in Virginia. Areas to my north, Williamsburg, Richmond did get quite a bit more, a couple of inches. So as we take a look at Wednesday, very cold, fairly dry as well. We have a couple of pieces of energy, and this will all kind of tail into our snowstorm that we're watching. We also see the Gulf energy starting to rise up. So again, timing is everything here. In my opinion, the cold air will be there, the storm will be there, and the big difference in the track is going to come from how quickly this storm moves in or doesn't move in. So we're going to be watching that very, very closely here. Let's just move on. I mean, not much to discuss here. Thursday is when things start to get interesting. And originally, we had seen a lot of snow down here in Texas being trended in by the models. Unfortunately for you guys, I know so many of you were hoping for it. It has started to trend away a little bit, and that isn't meaning that it's not going to happen for sure. But we have seen them start to kind of slowly but surely kind of move away from as much snowfall there for Texas and Oklahoma. That's kind of just what I've seen from the models. We also see some of the Rockies and Northern Plains getting some lighter to moderate snowfall happening as this storm is just getting underway. As we keep going towards Friday, we see that snow is very short-lived down here. We had seen models showing like 6, 8, 10 inches down there. I think they've really lowered the amounts at this point. We saw the storm originate somewhere off the coast of Texas, kind of move up near coastal Louisiana here. I've seen so many storms actually form like this over the past 10 years. A lot of them in the mid 2000s. Like, I feel like this was a very, very frequent storm track between like 2013 and 2017, let's call it. We probably had like 5 or 6 of these during those 5 or 6 years. And really, this is something I'm pretty familiar with, but it is going to be timing. It is everything with this type of scenario, and it is a quick mover. So even if we see heavy snowfall, it's a little slower on this western end. We do actually end up getting pretty nice totals here for Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, northern Mississippi, northern Alabama. It's a little slower at this point, and then it's really going to speed up. So areas in the east, if this does move off pretty flatly, I'm gonna go out and say that I think that this snowstorm would not be like a 6, 8, 10 inch snowstorm for these areas. If it moves off flatly is the key word here. I think that we're looking much more in terms of a 2 to 4 inch, maybe 4 to 6 inch snowstorm if Virginia and North Carolina get the snowfall here with a flatter storm. If it moves up the coast, again, a flatter storm, let me just kind of iterate this, but it's going to move straight out. So that's a quicker track than if we see something that wants to kind of move flatly and then turn and then move up the coast. That little curve there adds hours of total snowfall, that turning, because it slows the storm down, changes the direction, and overall these areas would likely, maybe not that far south, but areas in here would see higher totals. That's when we start talking about maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 inches of snowfall, maybe more for some folks. So the more major snowfall totals if we see that turn up the coast. Again, that just prolongs the track overall. So let's watch this play out on the European model right now. And this is, again, Friday afternoon, 1 p.m. As we move forward a couple of hours, this is 10 p.m. So we're starting to see the Ohio Valley, Kentucky as well in there, Tennessee getting this snowfall. These are similar areas that just saw quite a bit of snowfall with our previous snowstorm, and I'm sure that the snow isn't melting, so this will come on top of your current snowpack, which could make things even more extreme. You could end up with a foot of snowfall after the first and now this snowstorm are done. If those two kind of come together like this, could have a foot of snow on the ground after both are said and done, maybe more. So pretty big implications there. As we keep moving ahead, again, we've watched the storm track, but it's almost just beelining straight through off coastal Carolina. Again, this is basically almost a locked-in track. We could see some ticks to the south or north here. Again, quicker or slower, so it could be back here at this point. It could be a little bit out ahead, but that is basically the track up to this point. And the big question mark, is it going to continue on this trajectory sort of offshore? Or in the yellow, is it going to, at this point, go ahead and take that turn and start to curve more towards the north? That is the big question mark at this point. But everything before that, again, aside from small ticks, seems pretty locked in. So this is when the big changes come, about Saturday time frame. This is Saturday at 7 a.m. What we see is that it moves very close to the Outer Banks. My neck of the woods here, southeastern Virginia, the Delmarva there, Maryland and DC, again, areas that have just seen pretty high snowfall totals, could see another 2, 4, 6 inches of snowfall right here. I would be jumping for joy if this is the actual solution. This would bring me at least a brief period of heavy snowfall and some accumulation, but we can see that it is obviously not tracking up the coast on this one. It is moving directly offshore. So pretty big difference in track as far as miles are there towards this point, but it would only take a small change in timing for that up the coast solution to occur. We could see that if it moves in quicker, the jet stream would carry it a lot closer to the coast here, something like this. But because it's so late, what happens is the jet stream continues to move offshore eastward. That storm gets kind of shoved by that jet stream out to sea, and we end up with a flatter jet stream here, which it kind of follows in. So that's the European model solution as of 12Z today, the afternoon model run of January 7th. as we keep going, we end up with a colder pattern, not too crazy between, the 12th, 13th, 14th here, relatively cold, below normal for sure, but nothing crazy. It's as we move towards the 14th, 15th, 16th here that we get a deeper dive of cold air on this model. Heading southward towards Georgia, Florida, a lot colder. We do get a clipper system in there. Not a whole lot of snowfall, though, other than that. We do get a little bit of a more, what we would call transient snowfall event. And really, the way to look at this is we have the low here, another low up here. And really, all of this is just a cold front. And cold fronts don't move, like this. That would be a stationary front. A cold front, what we're going to see is everything kind of just move linearly like this. So you can imagine that with that effect, this snowfall would be relatively brief and relatively minor as far as accumulation in that type of scenario. This is not a full-blown snowstorm. That's just a very transient cold front with snowfall. Here's where we start to get maybe another sign of a snowstorm, a clipper system here that wants to dive down into this cold air. And this one would also be a relatively quick mover. Clippers are famous for being very, very quick, but a better chance at like 2 to 4, maybe 4 to 6 inches of snowfall for some folks after the 20th here if this storm occurred. Again, kind of going through the Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and down into the Mid-Atlantic, maybe even impacting the Northeast as well. And really, we end off the model run right here on the 22nd on this European model. And look at this. Full-blown positive P&A in place at the 22nd, and deep diving cold air in the east still being the look. So as of today, we still don't have an end in sight, which is just incredible to me. As we move on and take a look at our GFS model, a little bit of a different perspective. The GFS model has been ticking closer to the European model solution. Again, further south, more progressive, quickly moves out. But the key thing here is that it is still a little further north. If we see those trends continue, though, the European model might be just on to the right solution, but the GFS model has been slowly moving southward. But if we see this GFS model be correct, and maybe even some northern trends from here, which are very, very, much more likely throughout history, by the way. Doesn't happen every time, but these northern trends are kind of infamous. That would lead to bigger things. But we have seen this move a lot closer to the European model. Again, between today and the 10th, not a lot happening until we see this storm form very early on the 10th. 1005 here looks very similar. A little less snowfall for Texas on the GFS than even the European model. But really, we see this move through. Again, the track up until about this point is pretty much locked in. I would even say this point, because what we see happen from here, this looks very similar to the European model. Wintry weather here throughout the southern mid-Atlantic areas, as well as the southern Appalachian Mountains. But we see it suddenly want to jump while it's still over in the inland areas and want to really move north here very quickly, whereas the European model kept us way more offshore, eventually moving here. So the big differences kind of originate right here around Saturday morning as it's over the southeast. So watch this play out. It kind of moves up. It's much closer to northeast North Carolina, southeast Virginia. I would get absolutely screwed in this scenario. This low is very close to me. Rainfall and freezing rain trending in, and I just narrowly missed the snowfall, just like the last storm. So that would be a big bummer. But we do see something much different in this scenario. Snowfall for especially the Mid-Atlantic here, New Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania, Maryland, D.C., the Delmarva, Virginia here, all seeing snowfall on this GFS solution, which moves the storm in more quickly. And it doesn't quite get the push up into southern New England, but some areas do see snowfall as this one moves out. And again, over the past few runs, this has been trending further southward. So this is actually the furthest south we've seen the GFS model in a while. And if that trend continues, we could see something that looks a lot more like the European model fairly quickly. But we can tell that the trajectory on this model is much more up the coast right now, as opposed to the European model, which wants to take it almost directly offshore. So again, we're at this point here on the GFS. I want to switch us to the European model, and we see that this is much further south, much less progressive, and the cold air moves in quicker than the storm does on the European model is our major difference. Now, the total precipitation, at least according to the European model, and we will look at the GFS model in a second, looks very, very high for these areas where we have these coastal storms developing. So we get a lot of precipitation down here, very much so below average for most everywhere else. The European or the GFS model, though, we get tons up the East Coast because, for one thing, we get this storm tracking up the coast. So that's one thing. And another thing is that we see actually more activity in here after that point as well. So when we look at the anomalies, European model, again, South Central states above average, almost everywhere else below average, but the GFS model wants to take a lot of that up the coast. So big implications based on if this storm does move up the coast or not, even regarding the kind of precipitation averages as well. When we look at the European model's total snowfall, we can see decent amounts for Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, definitely very large for them. We're talking 6 to 10 at least in there on this European model. A lot of these areas in here, seeing plenty of snowfall with our storm as well. When we zoom in, again, 2 to 4 inches, like I said, mostly from this storm in these areas is what the European model would show, as it very quickly speeds up once it's getting near the East Coast. When we look at the GFS model, it's a little further north, it's a little higher with the amounts, and a lot less down here for Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, like I said. But these areas end up with quite a bit over the next 15 or so days. As we zoom into the east, again, a little further north with these totals, a lot of these areas end up still getting some snowfall at the tail end of the storm, but you're ending up with a dusting or an inch or so as opposed to multiple inches. So it is a huge dagger to all these snow lovers down here. And then we get higher amounts up to the north. We're talking more like 6 to 10 for these areas that just saw 6 to 10. So more on top of that, which is similar to what we're seeing in the Ohio Valley, where we're kind of doubling our amounts with this storm after the storm before it. So kind of just tacking onto those totals for a lot of these areas. We can see it doesn't quite make it up into New England. We actually have a little bit of a snow hole here between New York City, Connecticut, Boston. Well, Boston's kind of on the fringe there, but it doesn't make it quite up. If it's further north and closer to the coast, these areas get absolutely crushed with huge snowfall totals, as we've seen in days past, which, like I said in the beginning of the video, don't be surprised to see us flip-flop. We could head back to that solution and then maybe back to this one. There's still enough time for these models to pull their regular shenanigans and start moving back and forth, but we might be settling into something here. I feel like the models are moving closer and closer together, and it is something very similar to what the European model is showing. So that could be what wins out here. When we look at the temperatures, again, another big discussion in this video is kind of the long-range temperature pattern. We're colder now, again, decently cold throughout the next few days, nothing crazy. And then we get this larger blast for the 14th, 15th, 16th with deeper, colder air for the East Coast. It like wants to warm up here close to the 20th, but the cold just wants to hold on for dear life. And then we get another very cold blast along the 22nd. So try to find in here where the pattern breaks up, and you're going to have a hard time. It's really just cold from now to the 22nd for the most part, with, you know, ranging from slightly below average to highly above or below average. So we're seeing a very cold pattern, ranging in intensity, but overall cold for the next foreseeable future. GFS model, it's going to be very similar. Cold, cold, cold. 14th, 15th here, deeper cold blast, a lot less extreme than the European model though, but we do see a similar blast. Here's the 20th, 21st, 22nd, and I guess the GFS model is maybe the closest to breaking up the model as warm air starts to move in around the 23rd, but we still have a positive PNA out west, so I'm a little doubtful that we would see this full-blown warm air effect happen in the east. Just because we have this positive PNA here, I would say the cold is going to continue to try to move in if that is the case. So a little doubtful towards the end here of this GFS model run. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. I hope you liked this breakdown. I tried to go a little bit more in depth today as we're getting closer to this potential storm. And again, the dynamics at play are very sensitive. We could see massive differences in outcome based on very, very small changes in the timing, the intensity, anything with the alignment of the trough or ridges out west. That could make huge differences in the outcome with this one. So please bear with us. I don't think we might be moving towards a final outlook, if you will, on what this storm will look like, but I am a little bit skeptical still that we've reached kind of the conclusion of what we think is going to happen. So stick with us over the next few days and we'll keep you guys up to date. So be sure to subscribe. We upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below and I'll see you guys in the next video.